Hello, 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 hello. It's Sean Brady here with another fabulous episode of, I don't even know what we want to call this one. Probably another Medici member happiness hour. But we're not going to. We're not at Medici, and it's not going to take an hour.
But we are happy.
We are happy, and I am here with Craig, my man Caesar. How you doing, Craig?
I'm doing well, Sean. How are you?
I am fabuloso. We just went to.
How are they?
I don't know. How's everybody out there doing? Give us a wave. Give us a smile. We're talking to you, even if we're not live with you right now. But we are talking about excellence, and How did you say it? You just said it a second ago that was perfect.
Oh, my, now I'm on the spot. I have to remember what something brilliant that I said.
Yes.
I think I said something like, I want to encourage people to admit to their expertise.
That's what it was.
Because they're robbing others of the opportunity to benefit from that expertise if you don't kind of show it and talk about it.
You know, and so one of my expertise that I wasn't sharing or talking about was one with, just my different real estate experience.
Right.
And that was one. But then another one was, I didn't even tell you this, was public speaking.
Uh-huh.
So I forgot, because I hadn't done it for so long, and I just did it this past Friday, and I booked another engagement later in April that, I'll be helping people.
Right.
With my expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, everybody has expertise at something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of sharing that with the world.
Absolutely. And not being embarrassed about it,
No. Or thinking twice about it.
Right. Just
you don't
talk about it. The example that I gave when we were talking earlier was I'm a musician and I studied the violin. And over the years, I did that so much. I was pretty serious about it. So I spent a lot of time doing that. But
because you were saying since fourth grade.
Yeah, since fourth grade.
And then you played in college.
I played in college.
Most people don't do that.
I played in the St. Louis Philharmonic. I, had some pretty decent success and was planning to be a professional musician. But then I got married and, it's not the greatest lifestyle for raising kids. So.
Because what was the lifestyle that you'd have to do as a musician?
It was, 4 to 6 hours of personal practice a day, constantly traveling, working every holiday,
right?
Always being gone. So now I do it just because I love it, and I do it every holiday and constantly, at least 4 to 6, if not 8 hours a day. No, not quite that much. But the expertise part was I would get away from playing the violin from time to time.
Right.
And I would be, get an offer either to play for money or, a project that interested me. So I'd have to get my chops back, as we musicians say.
Yeah.
As we expert musicians say.
Yes.
So I would go back to the very basics from when I first started playing the violin and work my way back through the most difficult stuff that I could handle. And at some points, it wasn't the most difficult thing that I ever did, but it was always stretching myself to where I was right at that point in time. And each time I did that, I'd get a little bit further. So now if you ask me to play in a quartet tomorrow, I'd go home and I'd spend maybe 45 minutes to an hour playing scales.
Wow.
If I had the piece, I would learn it so I wasn't, sight reading. Or I would just show up and I would sight read and I would play it. Because guess what? I'm an expert at playing the violin. And I'm not ashamed of it.
Right.
And I don't get paid for it all the time, which is awesome.
And we were talking about artistry, so that's definitely your art.
Right.
Right? One of your arts. But then, we were also talking from a business context because while that art is your passion, you have a couple other passions as well.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how you are a coder and you develop all these wonderful apps and things like that.
Now wait.
Oh, yeah.
I'm an expert software engineer, Sean.
Expert software engineer, Sean. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's a very similar thing.
Yeah.
I was CIO for a number of years, got into management, and I've more recently gone back and I'm working 20 hours a week coding and absolutely loving it.
Right.
Because I just enjoy the problem solving. I'm really good at it. I've done it in a lot of different languages, a lot of different ways over the years. And so it's really fun for me to code.
Yeah.
And it pays really well, which is also a nice benefit.
And a very nice benefit, right?
Right.
Well, and then the other thing we were talking about, though, was technology as art.
Right.
So we were, and I got that from Seth Godin's book, The Icarus Deception. Or Godin.
Godin. You say Godin, I say Godin.
I say Godin, but I've heard God. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But the Icarus Deception was great because it talked about finding art in what you do.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be art like a musician or art like a painter or a sculptor or, something along that genre. but art inside of what you really do and you can find and be passionate about. There could be artists in farming,
Right.
right? In horticulture, and laying the asphalt in the parking lot that we're sitting on. It doesn't matter. So I love the idea of this technology as art, because the other fun thing you do, and this is how I first met you and knew you as, is kind of the hobby to do a tech shop.
Right.
Which is what? How do you describe that?
Well, it's envisioning things and making them happen. It's part of the maker movement. And that term, I think, is interpreted a lot of different ways. For me, it's the ability or giving yourself the freedom to do something that you don't know how to do.
Right.
And figure out that you can do it reasonably well, and
Right.
sometimes you can do it really well.
Really well.
So I found that I have had this latent talent for thinking about geometry and mathematics in a certain way, that I can design objects that are created in 2 dimensions and then become 3-dimensional objects because of the design. And I'm pretty convinced that it's because I've always had this passion for artists like M.C. Escher that use geometry heavily in their work,
Yes.
and thinking about different geometric problems, even at a subconscious level, for many decades. And so I've found these tools now that are available, like laser etchers, that allow me to take those ideas and make them happen in beautiful ways.
Huh.
So it's like this this expertise that I either wasn't owning or wasn't aware of, and suddenly it's found a voice in these works, and I get some very interesting reactions to my work. Especially that chess set. You've seen the chess set.
Oh yeah, I was about to say. Of course, you can't get a visual of these things.
Right.
Listening to this, and his stuff is really cool. I mean, you nailed it on the head with the M.C. Escher stuff. I thought I didn't put 2 and 2 together until you just said that. But just the way it all fits together, it doesn't seem like it should.
Right.
But then it does, and you're like, oh, that makes so much sense, and that's really cool.
Yeah, and there's exactly
like a puzzle.
one way that form could work in that way.
Right.
And he found it, so that was his art.
Which is very cool. So you're doing all these things, and I love how you're bringing it all together with an art focus, right? And your passion focus, and being an expert at whatever that is for you. Not you, but for the listeners that are out there, anybody can find their passion.
Absolutely.
And
It's there, whether they know it or not. They
It
just
is.
haven't. They either don't own it because they're embarrassed of it. They think it'd be bragging if they said they were really good at something. But you have it. And once you find it, it's amazing. I mean, if you would have asked me, a few years ago when I worked for Microsoft, if I'd be selling lizards for a for a living on the internet, I'd say, yeah, I'll have some of that, first of all. But, I've sold more of these lizards over the internet than anything else, and people just have an attraction to it. I created a beautiful execution of it, and so I'm willing to say I have this expertise that I didn't know I had until a year and a half ago.
And so for the audience out there, because they could be in St. Louis, but they could be around the world.
Right.
So where could they find what you're talking about, these lizards?
On my Etsy store, which I've spent exactly $0 promoting.
Woohoo!
And the Etsy store is Maker Makers, M-A-K-E-R-S, or sorry, M-A-K-E-R-M-A-K-E-R-S.
Maker Makers.
Maker Makers.
Maker singular and makers plural.
Yeah, now they're thoroughly confused. Nobody's going to find it. Just send Sean a message and say, where do I find this guy?
I'll put it in the show notes down below.
Right. There's also MakerMakers.com. And the mission of Maker Makers, a business just in a nutshell, is something I've been bootstrapping the last year and a half, 2 years. And the mission of Maker Makers is to make makers. So I educate kids in how to code using prototyping platforms that are out there. You might have heard like Raspberry Pi and Arduino, these sorts of things. So I authored a set of classes to teach kids to think differently about what's on the other side of that screen.
Yes.
Why do those pictures in those games show up on the phone? And I found in teaching these classes that kids you wouldn't typically think would be interested in science and math and kind of the way stuff work, once they figure out that it's not magic, they get really super inspired. So that's what Maker Makers is about.
When it's not magic, and even if it is magic, they can figure out how to do those things.
That's right.
Just like magic, right? That's very cool. I'll leave people with this final thought because we talked about this a little bit, but and I know it applies to a bunch of different things. Some pet peeves. right?
Right.
You talked about some of your personal pet peeves professionally, and what came up when I asked you that question?
It was pretty easy for me to think about, and I won't name the technology company necessarily.
Yes, no names, please.
But sometimes technology companies
Yes.
will do 80% of the work because that last 20% is very expensive,
Right.
and or it's very difficult. And so they'll put out 80% of a product.
Right.
And then we as the consumers pay the price of trying to figure out how to navigate that ecosystem. So that as a software engineer who gets paid to solve problems feels like an incomplete job, and that's a pet peeve of mine.
Because you like to have the job go all the way through completion, so it's just really turnkey, easy, done.
And or if I find a flaw, I would like to go and fix that.
Go
rather
back
than-
and fix
yeah.
it. Sure. And
But I'm not a big software company, and I know the pressures that are on organizations like that, especially the cost of that last 20% is huge. But I much prefer my existence as a software engineer now, where I can actually go back and fix stuff when I know that it's not perfect.
Well, and I used to work for a technology company. We did on-site offshore consulting and putting packages, information technology packages together, and it was the same thing. It's like, then you have here's your budget,
Right.
here's your $5 million budget, and then you have a cost overrun of $1 million because it has to be fixed the right way, or they call the vanilla implementation. That was the easy part,
Right.
but then making all the stuff work and fine-tune it is the harder part. But it's not limited to software and technology.
No.
I mentioned it in the real estate world, where you have contractors and it gets 80 or 90% done. I always said 90%, and it's that last 10% that takes the longest to get resolved because nobody wants to do it. It's
Right.
the finish work, and mentally,
Or you have to tear down the building and rebuild it in order to solve the problem.
that's the
right?
worst case scenario.
Right.
But it's usually it's things that always got stuck in my craw, because it's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, just finish this thing so I can pay you and get on with my life. And I actually changed my financial model to
Yeah.
reflect that. So it's like, all right, you don't get fully paid until you get
Right.
the last. It's like, I'm gonna hold back the last 30% until the last 20% is done.
There's an analog for software development.
See, there you go. What is
We
it?
say that you can define the budget, the delivery date, or the quality. For me, quality is non-negotiable. So we're going to have to talk about budget and when you're going to get it done, because
love
I'm
it.
going to do it perfectly,
Yep.
and it's going to cost you money,
Yep.
but you're going to get high value because at the end of the day, on the day that you need your functionality, it's going to be there.
I'm gonna steal that and put it into my real estate company.
Okay,
How about that?
feel free.
All right, and you guys feel free too, because it just makes the world a happier place.
Yay.
Craig Caesar, this is a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
And for everybody out there in social media, we love to see you in person, but if we can't, we'll see you on social media. I know, I told you it would be fun.
Yes.
I know. All right, everybody, see you later.